Luis Vargas. Thanks for coming back to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
We've been here before. We've talked all things politics and definitely want to pick your brain, throwing your hat back in the election ring.
Absolutely.
Running for state rep once again. I'm going to pick your brain on Rhode Island election politics shortly, but I want to start a little national because in the news this week, the revelation that the 2020 census from the Trump administration looks to include a citizenship question on that census. Now, there's been quite a discussion here in Rhode Island. GoLocal did poll all the gubernatorial candidates as to their thoughts on the matter. It varied amongst the Republicans. What's your sense? Because we know here in Rhode Island that population is an issue as it pertains to holding on to a congressional seat. But then there are those, Patricia Morgan came out and said very strongly, look, this question should certainly be on there. What are your thoughts on it?
Sure. So I think it's a very interesting question, no pun intended. Actually, I think when you look at the primary, people are going to be jockeying for position to who's the most conservative, who's the least conservative. So it is a little tricky in the Rhode Island primary. That said, I think, when you're looking at any sort of public policy, you have to look at not only if it's right on paper, but what it will be an impact. So I think the citizenship question, especially with Rhode Island in danger of losing a congressional seat, you want to count as many people as possible. So I think, in a selfish way, Rhode Island wants to keep that question away. As for the primary, I can't really blame Patricia Morgan for wanting to take that position.
Well, she sounded, I didn't know if the response had come from Patricia or Joe Trillo, because it sounded, as we know, Joe Trillo now running as an independent, the former Trump campaign chair. But as you said, it is primary politics. But again, going to Rhode Island as a whole, again, we're looking at that numbers games. Are you surprised that we did not hear comment from Mayor Fung on this, or is that being between the rock and the hard place?
So I would be surprised if this was the first time, but being that this is not the first time he's ducked a question, I would say I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, I think, Fung had a prime opportunity in this campaign to really be that, change agent, being that he had run before. Great things have happened in Cranston since, but it seems like, he's just, sort of duck and cover as of right now, which is unfortunate.
So, I mean, between that rock and the hard place, I mean, do you think he probably has consternation about those population numbers and just, but it's an election year. I'm sure it's going to come, I'm pretty sure it's going to come up in a debate. I wouldn't say I'm sure.
No, it will, and I think he should have taken this opportunity to hone what his answer is going to be, to really look at the policy and its impact. And, as governor, he's going to have to address these issues. And, as a governor, you want the most strong congressional representation that you can possibly have to help your state. So.
That is true. And, being a mayor of one of the largest cities in Rhode Island, I mean, he knows all the leadership. He, he has to work across the aisle to try to. So clearly he's clearly aware of this. It's interesting, Rhode Island joined other states in suing to stop this question. You're in law school right now. Are you at 2L yet?
I'm a second semester of 1L, so not quite. But,
so you can give us the legal, your legal
no,
opinion?
I cannot. In case any of my law school professors are watching. No, it's really interesting because it brings up sort of state rights and federal rights, and it goes again to looking at a policy and how it's going to impact people. So I can't say I'm surprised that Rhode Island, the Attorney General, is advocating for his state. But being that I'm just in 1L, I'm just going to sit back and watch and see how this turns out.
So there's legislation introduced this week by Carlos Tabone to provide economic incentives to try to get middle-class people to move here and to pay them $833 a month to the maximum of $10,000 a year. Your thoughts on the approach?
The way I see it, it is transparently trying to buy a congressional seat. At the end of the day, it's corporate welfare for individuals. It's unfortunate. I think that a state legislature says we can't make our state so great that people want to come here, so let's pay them to come here. I think that's unfortunate, unnecessary, and terrible public policy.
Well, we'll see if that ends up getting traction. It certainly got a lot of attention this week. Something that's gotten some attention in recent weeks and months is a story that GoLocal had reported on. This pertains to the America's Future Foundation. Now, this is an organization of conservative-leaning small government individuals looking forward. Tends to be a lot of Republicans, and there was the issue that they were looking to hold the event at a brewery, and the brewer got wind by someone who had posted something equating the group to the KKK, You intervened in this, did you not?
I did. So I'm actually a board member of America's Future Foundation. And being that I'm of Puerto Rican descent, it was very interesting to me to have somebody accusing us of being affiliated with the KKK. So what happened was basically an internet troll, an anonymous internet troll, posted on Instagram that Revival Brewery was hosting an event that was supportive of the KKK. Now, naturally, you would think they would reach out to us and say, hey, what's going on? But that was not done. Instead, one of the owners took that Instagram post to heart and immediately said, this event is not happening, this event is canceled, we do not support white supremacy. So like you said, I did intervene. I said, it's really interesting because we don't support white supremacy either. This is what our group's about. We're a group of young, liberty-minded people who just want to get together and get to know each other and support local businesses like Revival Brewery. So, it was unfortunate. We ended up having the event anyway at another local establishment. So the event went well, but it really goes to show how intense politics can be nowadays.
That is, to say the least, the very least. And talk with us a little bit about your thoughts. March for Our Lives last weekend here in Rhode Island. Obviously, the gun debate continues to take place following the recent shooting in Florida. Talk with us a little bit about your thoughts on the state's role, again, running for state rep, looking at where things stand policy-wise and proposal-wise as it pertains to guns.
Sure. So I think that the March for Our Lives was important. I think that young people getting involved in politics for better, whether you agree with the policy or not, I think it's extremely important for young people to have a voice, to feel they have a voice in our government, because a lot of people feel like they're sort of taken for granted. So I think it's great that it happened. As far as the specific policies in the state, I do think it's important to look at things like age restrictions. I mean, we already understand that a person's brain doesn't develop necessarily fully until they're at age 25. So I think some reasonable restrictions can be put in place in regards to firearm purchases, especially when a firearm can be used in self-defense and potentially be fatal.
So as you're going around, as you're looking towards running again this year for state rep, what are the conversations you're having with folks in your district as you're eyeing a seat once again?
Sure. So I get my haircut done down the street. I go to the corner store whenever possible, and when I talk to people, they're upset. And it's unfortunate. They're upset about speed cameras. They're upset about transparency in state government. But really, lately it's been the speed cameras.
It's been a little issue. And I'd love to have you put your legal hat on again, but as you said, you're only a second semester 1L. Sure. We do know there is a legal challenge, and we'll have to wait and see if that gets upheld. But it's how they're implemented and how they're...
Exactly. So like we were mentioning earlier, you look at the impact that a policy has, and especially in my neighborhood, the south side of Providence, people are getting 3 or 4 fines before they even know that there's a camera on the corner. Most of the city, $100 fine is, that's the difference between getting a full, weeks of groceries or, having to really sacrifice. And you get 3 or 4, you're talking about $400. That's more than a lot of people make in a week in Providence. So, this is really impacting families, and I hope that, the city will take a real look at this program and decide if it's really necessary.
Well, it clearly was a huge revenue generator from the first rollout of it. Now we've seen the pause because there has been a class action lawsuit that GoLocal was first to report pertaining to it, and an injunction as well. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the speed cameras moving forward, because the city claims it had told the citizens of this. There, I believe, was one press release.
Yeah.
But something that I saw you applaud the mayor on was his stepping back on the plastic bag ban. Talk with us about that.
Yeah. So as we the theme for today is impacts of public policy, and a plastic bag ban, while absolutely noble in its intentions, I think the use of plastic bags worldwide and the danger to the environment that it's posing is very important. I just think that, imposing a fee on people who want to use a plastic bag at the store, especially for one city, in one state, in one country, isn't really going to make an impact. It's interesting, I've been having this discussion with a lot of people lately, and when it comes to a fee, right, either the fee is going to stop them from using the plastic bag, in which case, why not just ban it? And if it's not going to stop them from using the plastic bag, then what's the point? That's the way I see it. So, I think I'm glad that the mayor, took that stand and said we're going to look at the impact of this policy before we actually start doing it. And, hopefully they decide against it, because I think it needs to, if it's going to be done, it should be done state level, even really at the congressional level.
So at the local level, at the state rep level, we talked about speed cameras, although that's a city one, but it's the constituents of whom you're dealing with. We talked a little bit about gun policy. Let's go statewide with the governor's race. And as we started talking about the census question and the issues that are really going to define the race. The governor comes out, just says that there were some additional jobs this month. This is after a number of months with job losses.
Right.
Is the economy the top question for the gubernatorial campaign?
I think it's actually not going to be, and the reason I say that is because we're at a very low unemployment rate. We haven't fully recovered yet from the recession, but things are going decently well, all things considered.
So if economy's in the number 2 spot, what's in the number 1?
I gotta be honest with you. I think it's transparency in government. I think it's our state government can't get things like UHIP done right. When our most needy can't get the food stamps that they need to be able to provide food for their family, I think that's going to be the biggest issue in my mind statewide. Protecting the vulnerable is, an extremely important statewide policy to look at.
And how interesting do you think this race is shaping up to be? Gubernatorial primary, we have one on the Democratic side, several independent candidates, several. Do we need runoff legislation?
So we have about, I think it's 14, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be 14 candidates for governor now. So it's going to be very interesting. Last time we had a 3-way race between moderate, Republican, and Democrat. Now we could have moderate, Democrat, Republican, 6 independents, Joe Trillo, Matt Brown. That said, as for runoff legislation, runoffs deal with one part of the problem where it's perceived that there's not a mandate when somebody wins. But realistically, voter participation is the problem.
Yeah.
Less than half of the state is voting in our statewide elections. So when you say this person doesn't have a mandate if they don't get 50% of the vote, they're really getting 50% of about 25% of the state.
Population.
So, I think the big thing is just letting people know there's an election going on, inspiring people to go out and vote, and not these sort of band-aid policies.
So speaking of policies, what can we expect to be hearing from the Vargas campaign in the coming weeks and months? How are you balancing school and running for office, by the way?
It's been interesting. So I'm in school, pretty much all day, and then I get home, kiss my wife, and then immediately go in and talk to people in my neighborhood to convince them that we need new state leadership. And the issues that I'm going to be focusing on are just transparency in government, having a monthly community meeting, where I can let the community know what's going on at the State House, because they shouldn't have to worry about these issues coming down the pipeline like speed cameras. There should be a state delegation that's united in Providence. We don't have that right now, and it hurts our city. I think it hurts our city in the State House, so hopefully I can change that.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in here, pick your brain on some hot button issues as well as some of your campaign goals. Luis Vargas, I'm sure we will talk in the coming weeks. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Let you go back to studying.
Absolutely.
Okay. Luis Vargas, law student and running for state rep, again wanted to talk about some hot button issues here in Rhode Island and nationally. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union broadcast.